welcome everybody. Welcome to the, what is this, number 13 for Rocky Mountain Division. It's been a lot, so thanks very much for joining us on this beautiful Monday. And yeah, we've got two presenters today, AD and Doug. AD is, AD's presenting on building confidence through confronting our self-talk. And then later, Doug is presenting interactive progression building. So those are our topics for today. And yeah, I'll kick it over to you, AD, and lead us off. So everybody give one more round of applause to AD.
Hey, can you give me co-host? Can you make me co-host, Conrad or Lynn?
Lynn will.
I have some things to share. So just, I think there's most of you I don't know personally, like I haven't met personally. So just to give a quick introduction of who I am, and kind of my background story is that I started instructing back in 2002 at Park City Resort. And then 2009, 2010, I went and worked at the Academy with Hargrave. That's where I met Doug. I started coaching competitively 2011. Moved back to Utah. I've been coaching for Team Utah since then. And then in that time frame, you know, I've seen myself struggle with my confidence. I've seen my fellow instructors, you know, be challenged with their confidence. And I've seen my athletes that I've coached be challenged with their confidence. And they have the skills that they need to perform well, but then come competition day, things just derail for them. So that's what pushed me to start studying sports psychology. And I've been studying that for the last 2 years. And so I've been working with athletes on how to work through some mental blocks and how to improve their performance through overcoming mental challenges. I'm here to present to you guys, but I'm not here to tell you how this applies to your life. It's up to you guys to kind of figure out how what I'm sharing with you applies to your own life, because I don't know you guys. And I'm definitely not an expert in your guys' life. So if you guys have anything to say throughout the presentation, just jump in. I like to have an interaction, you know, like Hargrave's likes. So I think I'm co-host now. Okay, so let me go and share my screen here. Trying to get used to managing the Zoom and chat and everything else at once. So I'm touching on building self-confidence and then confronting our self-talk. Again, like I've just seen a lot of people being challenged by their confidence. And when I was presenting a couple weeks ago with the Northwestern, when I mentioned self-talk, there seemed to be a lot of people that resonated with the self-talk and how that they've noticed that sometimes they'll talk negatively to themselves. So we'll just explore how we can alter our self-talk to increase our confidence. So let's see here. Again, trying to figure all this out. So what is self-confidence? You guys probably already know this, but just to make it clear, it's belief that you can successfully perform a desired behavior. There's a lot of other definitions out there, but we're going to stick with this one today. So we're going to start with the interactive activity. I used this one in Northwestern. It went over really well. It was a lot of fun. So we're going to go with it again. So you're going to go ahead and grab your cell phones, and you're going to text you're going to text Adria Smith 674. You're going to text that to the number 37607. And you guys let me know when you're ready. So maybe give a thumbs up or a yes. I see that Conrad just got his phone, I think.
Yeah. Sorry, that took me a second.
That's good. Okay.
Hold on.
Okay. Let's see what we got. Hello, Hargrave. How are you? See, he just joined, so I was just greeting him. All right, I'm assuming we're about ready. If not, I'm gonna exit it out of the screen into a new one, but this information will still be up on there. We're gonna jump into here. full screen. And you guys are going to reply through text how confident you guys feel just before you teach in front of your peers. So you're going to enter A, B, C, D, E, and then send that through your phones. So we got someone who's somewhat confident, fairly confident. All right, so fairly confident seems to be the strongest one right now. That's awesome. So, all right, so we got no one not so confident. And yeah, just so you guys know, this is fair. Nobody knows who's responding what, so feel free to put your actual input in there. All right, so nobody's not so confident, not at all confident, so that's awesome. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next question here. How confident are you in performing your hardest task in an exam? Very confident, fairly confident, somewhat confident, not very confident, not at all confident. All right. So it seems like we got a pretty fairly confident group here, somewhat confidence. All right. Still nobody that's not feeling confident at all. So this is good. All right, do I have everyone's input in? Thumbs up. Okay. And next question. How confident are you after failing an exam? I'll throw a little curveball in there for you, huh?
Question.
Yeah.
Confidence in what?
In yourself. In your abilities.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and really it's for you to interpret. So we got not very confident. So we see that failing something is definitely gonna impact on how we feel with our confidence. This is the first time out of the questions that we've seen I'm not very confident. But it's awesome to see they've still got fairly confident, somewhat confident in there. So I'm gonna go ahead and exit out of this screen. Going to see this next one here. Sorry, this is taking a minute to go back and forth here. So developing confidence is an important first step to becoming unstoppable. So in order to step into our power, we need to feel confident. And there's a couple of reasons why. Reason one, single most important psychological skill for any athlete to possess. We got reason number two, when it improves, other psychological complaints or challenges will shrink or disappear altogether. A lot of times our confidence is what bring other psychological challenges so that they start appearing. And then we got reason three, it impacts every aspect of identity and behavior as an athlete. So without confidence, it's going to affect every behavior, every aspect of the athlete, or as instructors, we're athletes, right? So everything improves when confidence is high. You're less anxious. You relish adversity, so you're gonna take that challenge on. You're more optimistic, enthusiastic. You have a more positive view on everything. You're less prone to panic. So you go into that challenge zone instead of that panic zone. You're going to tolerate more exertional pain. You feel more in control of your performance, yourself, and that's huge in a successful performance. You do better under pressure. You set higher goals for yourself, so you have more of a growth mindset, and you let mistakes go more easily. So a lot of times we get so hung up on our mistakes and how we felt, but when you're confident, you're able to let go more easily. So it was really cool to see that in the question, failing an exam, that some of you were still able to stay confident. So that shows a sense of resiliency, and then you try harder. So again, if you guys have any comments you want to throw in there or ask any questions, feel free to jump in. And then why are some athletes more confident than others? So there's a continuum on the self-confidence, okay? So you got one side that's less confidence, one that's more confidence, then you got in the middle. One of us we're always gonna fall to one side or the other. The goal is to be able to put yourself on the more confident side and then make that a consistent confidence so that you're gonna be able to jump back from adversity and be more resilient. And as humans, we are constantly judging ourselves and evaluating ourselves. And that's what helps us stay motivated and successful. So it's not a bad thing. But we all have different forms of excessive self-judgment. And as excessive self-judgment is what the things we want to look at. Okay, so we reflect. Everyone has a different virus in their cognitive system. And I have a little metaphor here on how that judgment system works. So you got the me tree here. So everything, each part of the tree reflects a different kind of judgment that we make about ourselves. And the deeper the problem lies, the more mental firepower is needed to correct it. So you got the self-worth down here, which is the roots. And this is the deeply held beliefs about your value and worth as a person. Okay, and this usually extends from your emotional, psychological needs, whether or not they were met. So it really dives deep into how you were developed really through the psychological and emotional needs. And then self-esteem here, some argue it's the same as the self-worth, but self-worth really is more fundamental to our overall happiness. Self-esteem is influenced and impacted more by our current experiences. So it's a generalized emotional judgment about yourself based on what you've experienced in life. And so these two, self-worth and self-esteem, they're the foundation to our self-confidence and our self-efficacy. And self-confidence, that's where the branches, some can be strong, some can be weak. So you can be confident in some areas of your life and not feel so confident in other areas of your life. So they're gonna stem from your self-esteem and your self-worth. And then the self-efficacy is very specific confidence in a specific task at hand. So if you're not confident in something, then you're probably not gonna feel like your self-efficacy is very high. Does that all make sense? Any questions there?
That was sweet. I like that.
Sweet, we're all good? All right.
That was really good. I think KB had a question from earlier. I don't know if that his mic is on or not, but he had a question is, how can we judge ourselves positively instead of looking for faults?
Yeah, so we will definitely dive into that, KB. We're gonna get into that. So that's a really good question, and I don't wanna disregard it now, but it's something we're definitely diving into.
Okay.
So if there's a question that still pops up in that area, please let me know and we can address it further.
I had a question about like confidence or like overconfidence or like kind of like fake self-confidence. And I don't know if you like have that addressed in your presentation already or not. But.
No, So what was your question?
Just like sometimes it's like you observe somebody having a lot of self-confidence, but it's like it's kind of fake self-confidence because they're like building themselves up in some areas where they don't have that great of ability or whatever. Some people think they are better at things than they really are.
Yeah. So there's always people that, put themselves off as confident, and maybe it comes across more arrogant, and it almost comes across, it almost stems from a lack of confidence, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then when it reaches self-efficacy, people can still feel that they're capable of it, but they're not actually capable of it. So depending on what their self-worth, self-esteem, and self-confidence is, if it's too high, they might have a false idea that they can accomplish it when really they're still not quite capable of accomplishing it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just feel that like sometimes some people have this like insane self-confidence, and that might be it might be a crutch because they don't have very high self-worth sort of thing. So they're like trying to balance. Yeah.
So I feel like that's a good point. I feel like they're either trying to make up for something in their self-worth or self-esteem, or they are maybe their confidence is too high where they're missing areas where they can still improve on, which is a real thing, right? So we want our confidence to be high, but not too high where we're not seeing things. Yeah. If anyone else any input for that, feel free to jump in.
So yeah, I have a quick question about it. This is KB. Sorry, I didn't know you said put the questions in the chat, so that's why I didn't unmute. But you see all these studies about fake it till you make it or fake it till you become it. In this case, is self-confidence, does that fall into that same realm where sometimes you got to find things to motivate you or get your confidence level up so you can perform to your abilities? I think there's the flip side of the coin as well, where you actually are trying to get yourself to a point where you can perform to the ability level you have. It's interesting if any of you have watched the Michael Jordan, The Last Dance. I mean, he is a prime example of that, where his abilities are obviously through the roof, but he would find little things that the opponent did or an announcer said to like get his confidence going so he can crush you. So I think there's a flip side of that self-confidence being high, as well as sometimes you're not performing to your level and you got to talk yourself up to that level that you're capable of.
Yeah, and I completely agree, KB. I think it's a good point. Is a lot of times talking to ourselves and convincing ourselves that we can achieve these things that we want to achieve. It's an effective strategy, and we'll dive a little bit deeper into why that works for us, the self-talk. So thank you for bringing that up, because I agree with that.
I really like the me tree and how it, like, to me, it resonates of like the importance of having the strong roots, right? And, if you have too much self-confidence, but not the self-worth to back it up, eventually you become top heavy and fall over, right?
Yeah. Oh, I like that way of looking at it. Yeah, I haven't looked at it that way before, and I think that's awesome. Yeah, because the self-esteem and the self-worth is really, that's the support to everything else. If that's not strong and sturdy, then things are gonna not hold up as well. Yeah, sweet. So we'll go ahead and jump on. If anyone else has anything to put in, go ahead and jump in. So the key is to distinguish strategies of effective self-judgment. And before we dive into a strategy, I want to jump into why it's important to look at our judgments and how it affects our confidence. So our judgments is pretty much, it influences our thoughts. Our thoughts are our judgment, and our thoughts influence the way we feel about ourselves. It could be negative or positive, and then that's the way we feel about ourselves. The feelings that come up is going to affect our behavior, our actions, our performance, whether or not we choose to do or not do something. So our judgments affect all aspects of our performance and the way we feel about ourselves. So here's a couple of irrational and distorted thought patterns. So this perfection is essential. So this is the idea that you have to always be performing at perfection, and if it's not perfection, then it's a fail. That's just not accurate. I mean, perfection is so hard to, perfection is probably non-existent, right? So we can still perform well and not have it perfect. One trial generalizations, these are generalized conclusion based on a single incident. So if you perform badly or poorly on one single time, then that you have this idea that, okay, well, I'm bad no matter what at that single thing all the time, that I can't improve on it, which is false, because we can improve on it. One time does not dictate whether or not we can grow. We got emotional reasoning. It's mistakes. You mistake feelings for facts, and that it's not just a transient emotion. Okay, so emotion is not always our reality. It's just a feeling within ourselves, so it does not dictate what's real. Our worth depends on achievements. So this is just the idea of that belief. We're only as good as our achievements, which is false, because we can grow a lot around achievements. We can grow within our process. So again, it's not always about achievements. Achievements can help with our confidence, but it's not the end all. And they got all or nothing thinking, so it's either black or white. It's either bad or good. We all know that there's always that continuum, in there. It's not always this or that. And personalization, this is where you have the belief that you are the focus of everything around you. And this is when you start comparing yourself to others all the time. So we're not always the focus of everyone else. So if we fall down or we don't do as well as we thought, not everyone's gonna notice, right? But some of us have the idea that everyone's gonna notice and I'm gonna be a huge failure. But it's not the case. And then catastrophizing. And this is awfulizing. So any failures will be a humiliating disaster. Okay, and so again, this isn't truth. Not everything is just as that bad. In our head we can make it that bad. So it's a choice whether or not we catastrophize things. And I feel inspired to tell you guys as well that these thought patterns can exist in others, and these they can be deflected onto you. So don't think that it's just thought patterns, irrational sort of thought patterns that are within you. It's with others that can affect you as well. So I would encourage you guys to look out for those and try to acknowledge that it's not always the case. These are just examples as well. There's other irrational sort of thought patterns. If you guys want a full list, my email's at the end and you guys can email me for that. So any questions there?
Yeah, 80. I didn't have a question. I just kind of had another example. I see this a lot with other instructors, is the worth depends on achievements thing. A lot of self-worth is tied up in certification levels or achievements in, whatever we're in that snowboard or ski instructing realm. And your performance there affects everything in your life.
Yeah.
Because it's just, a job that you do. It's not you, but it does.
And it's amazing how much of our identity gets wrapped up in being an instructor and being a successful instructor. And it's hard because these exams dictate our level within our career. So it's hard to detach from that and know that you can still be successful and achieve a lot without a certification or that achievement. So I agree, Conrad, comes up a lot in what we do. So.
Well, okay. And my next question was, do you have any strategies or tricks that you use with others when that comes up to rationale with them?
Yeah. So I don't want to get too far into it, but there's this idea of focusing on the process goals and the outcome goal. I think I saw ASA join in, and he actually touched along a little bit on this, if I'm correct. That if you identify and find successes in the process of things versus the outcome, which is an achievement, then you can find self-worth in that. So if you can find the little successes along the way to that achievement. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to go ahead and move on. So confronting our self-talk, this is one strategy that's can be really effective into making an impact on our confidence. So it's what we think and say to ourselves. And this is where I think, KB, you mentioned on it, like we can tell ourselves, we can encourage ourselves to almost fake that confidence or talk ourselves into do something. So this is where it starts applying. So we're going to go ahead and jump back on your phone. We're going to go ahead and do this another activity here. So for those of you who joined late, hold on one second. Let me get to the page so you guys can see it. Go ahead and text Adria Smith 674 in the text box to the number 37607. And then I'm in the wrong one. Let me go into the right one here. Sorry, if that information will come back up in just a second. It's being slow. Let me go into this one. Here's the information again up on top, so if you guys didn't get it the first time. All right, so this one I want you guys to reflect on, or I want you to build some self-awareness and you just self-talk. Again, no one's gonna know whose whose reply is whose. It's nobody knows. So your teach portion didn't go quite as planned. What do you say to yourself? So put a word in there, a phrase, anything you want. It's interesting to see what other people are saying to themselves compared to what you're saying, and it might bring some insight in. You got damn. Shucks, well. We got that period. I'm not sure what that means, but I'm sure that everyone has their meanings behind something. Let's see, improve, right? It's okay, nice. Is it uh-oh? All right, so we can see that there's some that seem to be more positive and some that maybe aren't quite as positive. And I'm gonna say that I don't wanna say that there's negative and positive self-talk. I'd like to say productive versus unproductive, right? Because sometimes what we consider negative talks, unproductive talks can actually push us. So it's not always a bad thing, but it's just something, we just wanna confront it. So we're gonna jump into the next question here. You're riding with a group of boarders who are stronger riders than you. What do you say to yourself? I see Lynn's got a smile on her face. So you got better, keep up, with who? Relax. Catch. This is awesome. All right, sweet. So we got one saying they got to relax. We got someone saying that it's awesome. Someone telling stuff keep up, catch them. All right. Let's see, better. Awesome. All right, I'm assuming everyone's got it in. Thumbs up. Okay, so we're gonna jump into this next one here. You have just been told you didn't pass your exam. What do you say to yourself? Everyone's thinking at the moment. Better luck next time. Nice. Next time. I already knew. Better luck next time. So a lot of emphasis on next time. Keep trying. Sweet. So it's good to see that there's not anything that says failure or that's too unproductive. Keep trying. Yeah. Here. Okay, so I think everyone's got that in. I'm gonna show you guys a video. I'm not gonna interpret the situation for you. It's for you guys to interpret it. And then we're gonna put in the thoughts that you're thinking. The internet. Got to add.
If you're looking to tone up or burn belly fat, then listen to me.
That's so toned.
At the end of the day, everything is your decision, and you got to be comfortable with it. I cut over too high. Wow. How did I cut so high?
Okay, so hopefully you guys can hear that. You got that. Gonna get into the next. What's your thoughts on that situation? You can see people are thinking here. Amazement. Okay. Yeah, fuck. Breathe, chill. Okay. What to do next? Calm. Sometimes it's hard to see which ones are coming in new because they're all switched positions. So we got calm, chill, what to do, think, stay, send it. All right, sweet. So I just kind of wanted this fun little activity. We could see how the other's thinking, maybe bring some insight into what you're thinking. And again, I don't think there's necessarily negative or positive self-talk. There's going to be productive and unproductive thoughts, okay? And the unproductive ones are generally the ones that are going to affect our confidence, impact our confidence. So going back to a presentation here, little slides. We got, move it that way. There's 2 steps in identifying our self-talk. So we got step number 1 is identify, 2 steps to changing our self-talk. So we got step 1 is identify your self-talk. So imagery, a lot of us know imagery. We can use that for skill retention. We can also use this to identify what we're saying to ourselves in those moments. So you're imagining and visualizing, you're living through that moment and creating those sensory experiences and paying attention to those thoughts that are popping up in that imagery experience. You got self-talk log. This is where you keep a log about situations and your feelings, and you want to write them down as soon as possible to when they occur. And I would even suggest if you don't have like an actual book, pull out your phone, log it into your phone. So there's power to putting it on paper, putting it, writing it down. It confirms things, and you can always refer back to it. And there's retrospection. So this is just reflecting on the situations where you performed poorly, where you performed strongly, and you create those thoughts prior. And then just notice those moments. So you're just reflecting on it, what you said to yourself. Just like if you presented your teach, you're always reflecting on where could I have done better, those kind of things that you're reflecting on, those moments that you're saying these things to yourself. Any questions there? Everyone's good? Okay. And we got step number 2 is you're combating your unproductive thoughts. So it's almost like you got an angel and devil on your shoulder. You got the devil telling you these unproductive things. Your angel's going to combat that devil, okay? So that you got countering. So you're using facts and reason to refute underlying beliefs and assumptions. So just to give you an example, if you have a thought of, hey, I'm not as good an instructor as that guy over there, as so-and-so, you can come back and argue against that using facts to combat this. Well, I still have, to reflect back on your accomplishments and your performances. That's always effective. You can reflect or bring out the facts that you interact with people, that you help this person achieve this. So you're just finding those facts that combat that unproductive thought or belief or feeling. And then you got reframing. So this is a process where you're creating alternative frames of reference or a different way of looking at it. So I'm not as good as so-and-so over there, as instructing. Well, that's okay. We all have our own process. We all have our own, route. And I'm a different person than him. And it doesn't mean that he's so much, is that much better than me. I can still be good. You guys see the difference between there? So you want to make sure that you're not bullshitting yourself. When your students, when you tell your students, when you bullshit them, they can pick up on that. You can pick up on that on yourself, with yourself as well. Okay, yourself knows when you're feeding it crap. Okay. Does anyone else want to throw an example out there where you can maybe counter it or reframe it? If no one has anything, that's okay too. I just thought maybe someone. Lynn?
When you're unsuccessful in an exam and then you look at some things that you were really successful on in that exam that you did well on, even though you didn't pass.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's awesome because you're looking at the process. What have you learned in a situation? I'm not a failure just because I didn't pass. So that's reframing it, right? Anyone else got an example? Or even something that they want help with countering or reframing. And I can't see everybody, so if I'm missing somebody, let me know.
KB here.
Hey, KB.
So for me, I know when I enter the park, I have to sometimes counter myself on the boxes or rails, depending on what trick I'm going for, because I know I have the skill set, but I don't ride rails and boxes enough. So every now and again, my confidence wavers, and so I have to counter that by either I'm a visual guy, so I like visualize myself doing it, or oh, you've done this in the past, just been a while since you've done it. You do have the skills to do it. But yeah, I do counter myself quite a bit when I'm coming into boxes and rails.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. So in that moment, you're doubting your box ability, but then you bring up the fact, hey, I've done this before. I've been successful at it. There's no reason why I can't do it again. So sweet. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, thinking we're good there. So this is, I used this particular activity last time in the Northwestern, but it's really applicable here. So I wanted to recycle it, and this is just confronting the bullshit. And again, it's just an example of, logging in those thoughts and those feelings that you have. And then sometimes writing it down, like evidence of the contrary, writing it down, it makes it more solid and more concrete. And it's easier to refer back to in those moments where you actually are struggling with your self-talk or your confidence. So writing it down, you can refer back to it. Yeah, so just, I've done this trick in a competition. This is similar to what you said, KB. Done this trick in competition only in practice. There's no way I'll be able to do it successfully. But on the contrary, there's no reason why I shouldn't be able to do it successfully. I put in the practice, master this trick, and I'm comfortable with the process. If I do it different than what I've done in practice, I'll have it. Or if I do it the same as I do in practice, I'll have it. So everyone good with that? I think we're good on time. So just have a couple of reflective questions for you guys. Why is self-confidence important as instructors and coaches? So if anyone wants to jump in there, just for you guys to reflect on things and give your input and how it applies to you.
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
Well, I think it's, if you, as a coach or an instructor, if you're not confident in what you're kind of delivering to your guests or your person you're coaching, they're going to sense that, and it's hard for them to have confidence in themselves if they don't have confidence in you.
Yeah, that's a good point, right? Because if we're not confident in who's teaching us or who's taking us down this mountain, we're not going to have confidence in ourselves either. So nice, thanks, Damien. I think there's someone else that was going to jump in.
I was going to say the exact same thing. So thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, Conrad.
No problem.
Well, I'm going to take it sort of off Snow in the sense that even before we begin any turns on a board or anything, your guest sees that confidence, your athlete sees that confidence or lack of confidence. We know people have either looked at YouTube or something out with all the information out there. And so it's just as important to have the confidence when we meet our guests, because a lot of times they have a lot of either questions or some understanding of snowboarding through videos they've watched. Maybe they've watched the Shaun White interview, etc. And so you have to be confident in the answers that you're giving to a lot of the questions to build that the guest confidence in you. So when you actually do get on the snow, they know you know what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. So, if we're exuding that confidence, then it's a lot easier for us to build that trust with our athletes and those that they're working with. they're gonna trust us to lead them in the right direction. Anyone else want to throw anything out there? Okay. We can move on to the next question. What should we be aware of about self-confidence when instructing and coaching? I think that was meant to say, let's see. Yeah, I guess that we're going to move on to the next question.
Well, no, I think it's a great question.
Okay.
And the reason I think it's a great question is sometimes you can be so confident that you're blinded by either what your guests are saying, the athletes trying to tell you what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and you're so confident that your method works or the way you're teaching it works because you've done it 1,000 times that way before and it worked. And sometimes it doesn't connect or resonate with the guests because you aren't hearing the feedback they're giving you about why they can't perform that trick or why it doesn't feel right. So I think overconfidence can blind you a little bit. I think you mentioned that earlier. In this case, it can blind you to the point where you're not listening to the feedback your guest is giving you. You know, we've all done that old weight on the front foot, weight on the front foot, weight on the front foot. And it's like, no, they're not getting that, but you're so confident it works. You don't change up the verbiage, you don't change up the analogy, etc.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. So we need to be aware of their self-confidence as well, and then how that affects how they're receiving things, how they progress through things, and all that kind of stuff. So thanks for bringing that in, Kibbe. Does anyone else want to throw anything else in with that area?
Yeah, I've got an expansion on that. Sorry, Conrad. Every once in a while, you actually see somebody perform, right? They're actually doing it, what you've asked them to do, but they don't feel like they're being successful. And so you've seen it. So you have empirical evidence that they can do it, but they don't believe they are. That is their reality. You need to change what you're doing to work to their reality, not to the actual reality of the situation, because they don't believe they're accomplishing it, even though you know they are. So you got to separate your confidence in what they're doing and work to their confidence level.
Yeah, nice. That's so true, is that sometimes, and I mean, this happens with, like, I think all of us, when people tell us, you did really good, that was awesome, and you're like, no, it wasn't, that was crap, you know? And it's all about the reality. So thank you for the expansion. Conrad, did you have something to say?
Yeah, we just seem to be speaking at the same time, Damien. So I just had, like, sometimes confidence can be really intimidating for some people. If, like, an instructor has, like, a lot of confidence, maybe that comes off as arrogance to some people or whatever, and it's like, it's too much, and the person who's taking the lesson or taking the clinic or exam or whatever gets overwhelmed by that, and they're like, this is way too much, and they're intimidated by it. So, like, adjusting your level of outwardly projected confidence can make a big difference in those situations, I think.
Yeah, and I think if we're aware of that, we can definitely build that rapport quicker with our athletes and our clients, right?
Yeah, it can be tricky sometimes, just because, like, there's sometimes it's sort of like a snowboarder kind of relationship between those two parties that one party thinks is there and one party thinks isn't.
We're not naming the other party.
Well, it's like your student or whatever, you know, like, yeah. Anyway, that was a thought.
What about
if it's all right to expand a little bit, Edie, I really like what Conrad just said there about, he mentioned that word arrogance. And when it comes to confidence, it's really important to understand what it is and what it isn't, and knowing that confidence is not arrogance, and more importantly, not ignorance, right? And so knowing that the real definition of confidence is that you are, regardless of what's going on with the weather or that particular day, that you're always going to put forward your best effort regardless, and being able to communicate that with your students and with yourself is a pretty important way to look at confidence versus the other two ways that people tend to look at it, which is more of that arrogant, I can do this just because I say that I can, or ignorance, looking at yourself in a way that might not match with reality.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's important for us to reflect on ourselves and how we're putting that out there. Are we coming across as arrogant? Are we coming across as confident in what we're doing, and how that communicates too?
I think that's that, you know, that fine line that everyone talks about between confidence and arrogance. In my opinion, it's one and the same. If you look at the top athletes in the world, a lot of people would say that they're arrogant because they're so confident in their ability. They're so confident in what they're doing. But the flip side of that is a huge part of why they are successful. When you look at the Kobe Bryants, the Michael Jordans, the Tom Brady's of the world, when they step on the field or into their arena, it's arrogant. It's almost perceived arrogance. But what we don't fully understand is where they gain the confidence from, which is by putting in the work, putting in the hours and hours of studying for an exam, putting in the hours and hours of riding moguls so you're as smooth as you can be. That's what actually creates that confidence / arrogance for you to perform, right? And I think if you don't have some level of it, you're not going to perform well, or it's going to be a challenge to meet the level that's being asked of you.
Yeah, I like your point there, KB, because I think you're right, and I think there's a lot of interpretations on what is arrogance and what is confidence. And the way I look at it, and this is just my thoughts on it, is that those ones that come across as arrogant, I think people are just misinterpreting their confidence. That's really just a really strong sense of confidence in themselves. To me, arrogance is more so a fake confidence, where they're projecting this fake sense of confidence. Does that make sense? I don't know if you.
It does. Arrogance is like the Kardashians.
Yeah, I love it. Hope there's more Kardashian fans out there.
I think there's like a scale for competitive athlete needs a different level of confidence to arrogance ratio as opposed to a coach, as opposed to an instructor. You know, there's a different, that hyper confidence is really relevant to what outcome you're trying to get.
Yeah, good point. I think that's going to depend on the student or the client as well. You know, how are they going to interpret what kind of confidence level you give them? Did I understand that correctly, Damien?
Yeah, I mean, to like KB's example of Michael Jordan, his level of skill and arrogance is intimidating to the people he's competing against. So that's really beneficial to him because it gives him an edge over his competition. If I walk up to a group of people with a bunch of seemingly arrogant, when I want them to listen to me, that's not going to be as effective. That doesn't give me an advantage.
Yeah, and it's actually a game strategy for some competitive athletes is to act as confidently as they can to get into the mind of their opponent. So it is a strategy. Yeah. Lynn, I think you had something to say at one point.
I think somebody covered it already. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Here's a question to the group. What would you consider, like, you know, the Michael Jordan of our industry, obviously Shaun White and the half pipe. What do you guys think about him? Is it confidence? Is it arrogance? And or is it that he believes in all the work that he's put in to get to that point?
Yes.
I'm gonna let you guys answer that.
I think a lot of it's perception. You know, the individual may feel not as confident as they appear, while the perception of an outside person, especially someone who is nothing really other than watching them on TV, right? They don't actually have a real human connection to the person. It's easier for them to interpret something different from what it is based on perceptions.
Nice. Anyone else want to add to that?
I've got something to add.
Yeah, I think.
I need to make the screen smaller though so I can read it. Do you want to go first?
No, go for it.
All right, so I'm looking up a definition of arrogance right now. It says it's someone who's full of self-worth or self-importance, which goes along with the me tree, and who tells and shows that they have a feeling of superiority over others. So I think the key part is the superiority over others.
And it's the self-importance too, yeah.
But
we're looking that up.
But here's the question or the challenge with the definition. When I step on a field or you step into an exam, should you feel like your work or who you're going to compete against, you're not superior over them? I think that's what gives you an edge to ride at the highest level, to perform at the highest level. Like in our case, it might be I feel superior to the standard. Like I know I've done a half pipe all year. I know I've done this all year, and I'm going to crush it. Like, I think you need some of that. And I don't know who was speaking earlier about the scale or the spectrum. I would agree with that, but I think you need some of that to perform at the level we're being asked to perform at.
I think if you look at it as a competition though, it changes it and makes it just harder and different. I think self-confidence and self-efficacy are more important than feeling like you're better than a standard or I'm better than a standard. But I think we all have different ways to get ready for an exam.
Yeah, maybe it's more so that you believe that you can perform better than the opponent, but not necessarily that you are a better being than that person. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm purely talking about performance.
Okay.
I'm not talking about I'm better than, Lynn or Lynn's better than me. I'm talking about I am going to be better than what is asked of me. And that's the superior feeling, right? And this might be more from my competitive background, but I remember when I went to the Super Bowl in Seattle and we were like 14-2 going into the playoffs. When we stepped on the field, it wasn't we're better than this team. It was how fast can we crush you, because we know we're that much better than you as a team, and the output we're going to put on display is much better than the output you're going to put out.
Yeah. It has
nothing to do with like I think I'm better than someone or they're better than me. What it comes down to is whatever you're going to put out, I'm going to meet and match and then some.
I love that you're bringing your perspective in from a competitive standpoint, KB, because it's insightful. So I appreciate you bringing that in. And I definitely agree that there should be a sense of arrogance in your self-efficacy, that knowing that you can do better, you can outperform your opponent, and do better in that way. But yeah, but it doesn't mean you're better than Lynn or whoever else. But again, everyone has their different perspectives on things. So, anything else you want to add? I know Conrad has his hand up.
Yeah, can I jump in real quick? A marker that I use, and this is probably not at all going along with like positive self-talk or whatever, but a marker that I use to know if someone has a lot of self-confidence is self-deprecating jokes. Like how many times can they self-deprecate and still like perform to the level? And for me, because that's like a oh, I don't really care, and like a humbling sort of thing as well. But they know it's a joke when they're saying it, but how many times can they kind of throw themselves under the bus?
Yeah.
That's a marker for me that someone does have a higher level truly of self-confidence.
Yeah, I feel like
poppy syndrome.
What syndrome? Jamie, what would you say?
Kiwi comment.
Oh.
Tall poppy syndrome.
So I don't want to cut into Doug's time, but let's go ahead and jump into the next question. And if we need to cut it short, we will. Why would self-talk be important to consider when instructing and coaching? So we're jumping more into the topic of self-talk. And if no one has anything to say here, we can keep, if anyone has anything else to say about the previous question.
One thing that I kind of thought of when kind of going over this question and the last question is that we kind of have to be aware that even though we might see a student that might be at a level and they might not believe that they're at a level, we might need to back off of that student sometimes to not put them in danger. Like if we think that they have the ability to do a trick or go to new terrain and they don't think that they have that ability, that can weigh them down sometimes. It might put them in danger of injuring themselves, because instead of having that confidence, they're kind of thinking in the back of their head that they can't do it.
Yeah.
So when to back off of a student, even though they might have the ability to do something, we have confidence in them. If they don't have confidence in themselves, then we have to try and build up that confidence elsewhere before just saying, hey, you can do this, you can do this. I think that being a cheerleader is something that a lot of us start to get into at the point in our careers. And sometimes that can be really detrimental to students' writing.
That's a good point. It's we should be, thoughtful and mindful about what might be going on in their heads that might be keeping them from, progressing like we think they should. So awesome. Anyone else? Thanks for that, Cody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely had some times when while teaching and I've been given a high level lesson, and when I show up as a slightly quieter female, sometimes I can tell as I walked up, people went, or like a freestyle lesson, right? And they're like, wait, what does this chick know? So I give myself a little like, okay, we got this. We're going to have a great time, and they're going to realize that this chick knows how to snowboard and how to teach them how to be better. So there's times where I have done that for myself going into a lesson, kind of in the opposite realm where maybe they're overly confident, and then seeing me walk up, like, it gets a little weird.
Yeah. So we never know what the other person's thinking, like you gave your example of thinking this in that moment. Maybe someone else is thinking that similar thing too, or something similar, or yeah. Is that along the lines of what you were sharing, Jamie?
Well, yeah, and kind of just pumping myself up so I'm like, I can deliver my confidence and deliver what I'm going to teach in my clinic with that confidence, because sometimes people see the outward package and that already kind of lowers me in that confident level, I guess.
No, people don't always see like the internal process going on. Yeah.
You got to build up your confidence tree again from your self-worth through your trunk and into your branches.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, sweet. I've gone over 7. So if anyone has anything that's really popping out that they want to share further on any of these questions or any of the questions that we haven't quite covered, let's put it out there and then we'll end it here. But if not, that's totally fine too. Okay. Well, I just want to conclude. Hopefully this gives you some insight on, more perspective on maybe how confidence works, and give you, open your mind up to maybe what others might be experiencing as well. So thank you for everyone's participation and letting me present here. I'm really excited to share this knowledge. So thank you. I appreciate it. Doug, where's yours?
Appreciate you. Round of applause for radio, everybody. That was great. It got everybody pretty engaged, especially towards the end. So that was awesome. Sweet. If anybody needs a drink of water real quick, grab a snack, go to the bathroom, whatever you need to do, just for a minute, and then we will jump into Doug. So yeah, thanks again for presenting, Eddie.
And I'm sorry if I didn't see any chats. I didn't have the chat pulled up, so I'm sorry if I missed something.
Nobody was really typing in chat.
Yeah, there wasn't. Okay, cool.
You're all good. So cool. All right.
Great job, Eddie. That was awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, when some people come back, Doug, you're more than welcome to jump back in. Yeah. So whenever you're ready, I think Jamie and Damien are just out for a quick something. So
cool. Well, I'm going to start out I'm just going to drop a few links into chat to start things. And these will be the resources. We'll use, the first one is a link on my website. At the bottom of that article, there's a link to the survey tool that we're going to use. So I'll build up the presentation and then we'll eventually all jump into that survey tool, the little progression building tool all together. So that'll be a fun, I am really impressed by AASI's interactive, element of her presentation. So I'm glad that I have an interactive element, because otherwise I'd feel like, so at least I'm like, yeah, I can compete with AASI's really good presentation. And
that poll everyone thing was awesome. That was super great.
Yeah. I feel like it's fun for people, and I feel like it's effective, so.
It's very effective.
Used it the first time and chose to use it again, so.
Yeah, that was super sweet.
It worked really well.
Screen, like straight after you text it. It's not just like you're reading it off. That's cool.
So, all right, I'm loving the stash, bro.
You mean peach fuzz? Yeah, like I called it bum fluff, I think, a while ago, and apparently that's not a thing in this country. But it's like, like the fluff that you have on your bum. But apparently it's peach fuzz, and that makes more sense.
Too funny. Okay. So thank you everybody for joining. My name is Doug Fagel. I am based in Truckee, California in the Lake Tahoe area. I've been here teaching snowboarding and all sorts of stuff since 2001. I got my start actually on the East Coast at Whiteface Mountain is where I started teaching. So otherwise known as Ice Face. Biggest vertical drop on the East Coast, 3,200 vertical feet of at times solid ice. So that's where I kind of per se cut my teeth in the world of teaching snowboarding. For me, it was in my second year of teaching that I realized that was when I was going to make a career out of teaching snowboarding and chase that path of becoming a career snow sports educator. So at that time, I not only decided to make that my career, but I also dedicated kind of to a specific mission. And that mission was to help more people go snowboarding. That has kind of expanded to be really snowboarding and skiing. I did start out skiing, and then 3 years later was able to go snowboarding for my first time. It was something that I would call, I was probably pretty addicted to, and it just, just stoked me out that, following a career and chasing that has been kind of where I've been able to continue over 20 years. I have had the opportunity to not only work with ski and snowboard schools as a frontline instructor, but also as a manager, supervisor, trainer. I also helped to found the Sugar Bowl snowboard team in 2004 season. So I've also connected to training athletes. I would say the majority of my time now, I spend training trainers. And if I'm not training trainers, I'm training instructors. I spend less time actually teaching snowboarding than maybe I once did. I'm also chasing that path of guiding. I became a lead guide for Homewood Snowcat Adventures program this year. So getting out in the backcountry has always been a passion, but now actually being able to do that professionally has been pretty awesome. So 2012, I launched Thrive Snowboard. So I'm designing product and designing boards, which has always been kind of a passion. And in the last few years, I've launched my Snow Coach, and I'll share some links and some details there, because the first link I posted in chat is an article that AASI helped me write. It's very simple. I will reference that a little bit. And then there's a cool tool that I linked in that, but also shared that form. We're going to do that together. So this mission today is a bit of an experiment. So hopefully you guys are all willing to join me in this experiment. It is a progression tool with 3 progressions that you guys will share some input on. And then the goal of the tool it's not a test. It's not to see who's right and wrong, because that's not how snowboard teaching works in reality. It's really about, can we input what we would do, and then can we look at what everybody else put in and maybe try to learn a few things from what other people put in into that form, into their progression steps. So that's kind of the flow of things. Before I jump in, anybody have any questions about me or anything in regards to the topic? Everybody feeling good? All right. So progression building. I really, working with a lot of people, working with trainers, working with instructors, I found that a lot of instructors, through the process of becoming more knowledgeable, sometimes got lost in what was most important, right? What was the key as far as what am I teaching, right? So when I talk about, and when we think about what are we trying to achieve, a lot of times we hear the student have a goal, or we see them ride, and then we get into what I would like to consider the instructor goal. And the instructor goal happens to become very much so based around what the snowboard's doing, very much so based around the performance, very much so, oh, is it chattering? Is it shaping a nice turn? Is it, right? And I think that the key is understanding that, yes, that is a component. The instructor goal is what we end up going to, especially as educators, as people that know a lot of information about the mechanics of body movement connected to board performance. But being able to put together the basic tools of a progression have to do with putting all of the pieces together, breaking it down, and then making sure we're putting them all back together for that common purpose of the student goal. So I'm going to share a quick little thing here. And this is the, oop, wrong screen. Let me try that one more time. Share, there we go. Oh, it still did it. Can you guys see the snowboarder? Yeah, okay. So this is the simple little article. The link is there, so if you want to read it in detail. But it's really building it into this basic progression cycle. And with this basic progression cycle, it's really based around the importance of the rider goal. And with our rider goal, it is, okay, what is the rider, what do they really want? And sometimes what they want is based around snowboard performance. And sometimes what they want is just based around the enjoyment of the day. Some of it's based around, what group of people they're riding with. And some of that's changing. Maybe I've worked with a student or an athlete for, so I've got that rapport already built, but maybe that's changing day to day based on the snow conditions, how the person's feeling. So thinking about that rider goal as being, once I have that, that's something that I'm always kind of keeping in the forefront of our mind, right? So we're keeping that connection to the importance of the rider goal. We then take our rider goal and then we break it down into, okay, well, the goal, is it relevant to terrain? And if someone's saying, I want to do this, maybe they're a beginner snowboarder. Well, if the terrain goal isn't there, well, then I can keep the terrain super low and make goals very achievable. Or maybe they're like, I must go to that run, right? So much of the goal then is relevant to that terrain piece. And specifically, there is a hierarchy in this cycle. Then we get into the performance goal. Again, this is what I like to call the instructor goal. It's very much so around, what is the snowboard doing? What is the sequence of actions? What does the equipment need to achieve? When we go into the next step, into our movements, this is really based around, I like to ask instructors that I'm working with, what do we teach, you know? And other than teaching how to have a smile on our face and the camaraderie, we teach movements and the basis around how to move to create performance, to access terrain, and to achieve our goals. So there's the basic kind of flow of that cycle. So again, you can kind of take a look into this short little article. If you jump down to the bottom of this article, it goes into build the progression, right? So we're going to actually practice this little exercise of building the progression. So let me just pop this off for a sec. Oops. Okay. So far, anybody have any feedback, comments on just that simple structure?
Seems pretty self-explanatory, Doug. It's pretty
Cool.
sweet. Cool.
Awesome. So when we think about the role we play, for me, you know, it's those changing hats. You know, sometimes when I go out on the mountain, I just want to be a rider, right? And I want to be coached, right? I want to progress my skills, and I want to just be a snowboarder. Some days I go out and I want to teach somebody, you know, like, oh my gosh, I haven't actually taught beginners on my own in quite some time. So being able to actually work with some beginners, sometimes I jump into that instructor role, or maybe it's everywhere in between. Doesn't ability level of the student not always relevant on that. Still gives me that self-satisfaction. What role do you guys tend to play? Are you supervisor, trainer, instructor? What roles do we have here in the mix? Feel free to use the chat or just turn yourself off mute for a second. And everybody go at once. No, I'm just kidding. We'll just pace it out. What roles do you guys play that are here in this mix today?
So for Northern Hemisphere, I'm a trainer and instructor. Southern Hemisphere, full-time instructor trainer.
Cool. Thanks, Damien. We've got Lynn, instructor trainer, Cody, instructor, Tyson, instructor trainer, Kevin, trainer, instructor, and coach. Awesome. Marshall, instructor, AD, obviously primarily working as a coach. And I think that that's an interesting thing, because once you start expanding to those different roles, you know, and even if the two roles that you play are just at times rider and sometimes instructor, you know, those are still two very specific roles. So when we jump into this exercise, we are going to kind of be focused towards the instructor, coach, trainer role. But think of it from, okay, I've got this student in front of me, and I'm going to actually try to, what's some of the first things that come to mind, and how can I communicate those things very simply? So when we look at this, it's what hat are you wearing? As we're doing this, keeping that kind of thought process of what is that rider's goal, right? So if you guys wanted to follow that link, so let's see. So here's the link. So if you guys, it should work on your phone, it should work on your computer. So it shouldn't take too long. If you want to go back and edit or go back and enter, this is a live survey. It does ask for your email. I won't be spamming you guys, but I may reach out to you guys for if I build another one, just to see if you guys want to check it out.
We're talking about carving here, right?
This whole thing is going to be based around, yeah. So I took 3 exercises, and they're based around carving, and they kind of build one to the next. So you'll notice that the first one here, and let me share this screen here. Okay. So everybody see the progression building tool? Yep. So just enter this info here. Again, it's a link back to some of these resources with the article. It talks about the scenario, you know, we're setting up a scenario. This first one obviously gets into something that's, I would say more, it's still developmental because in nature, this is common, but per se, it could be looked as corrective as well. So the progression building tools, each of the 3 exercises will have the same baseline of questions. And you can select whatever ones you feel are relevant. And, you know, if you're like, all 5 are relevant, just check on the main 2. But thinking about our progression building tools that we already use or most likely use, static is obviously when we're standing still, whether our board's off or board's on. Dynamic is when we're in motion. Simple can be relevant to the rider. It can be something that they're familiar with, or simple can be something that's more isolated, right? So if I'm trying to isolate a movement, but sometimes for an advanced level athlete, simple is more like what's familiar. Complex is something that we're introducing new. Generally, if we look at, you know, think about stages of motor development, complex would be something the brain has to actually process and work through to execute. Sequence versus blended. You know, blended movements are when you know, take a pop and a spin and you blend them together, you have a new movement. Maybe sequence could be like an ollie. An ollie is always a sequence of specific skills blended, you know, put one in order in a linear fashion. Tasks to free ride, that's when, you know, okay, I had them doing these cool traverse tasks and then I had them practicing their free ride. And then of course we're using our timing, intensity, duration, rate. And then, so you guys jump in, feel free to, you know, add as much as little. If you want 1-word answers, that's fine. If you want to write short, you know, a couple sentences, that's fine too. And in the meantime, while you guys are doing that, I'll show you what this morning looked like at my house. Oh,
That's sweet, Doug. Oh yeah.
Yes.
And I know, I know a lot of people get like frustrated when they see snow. For me, I'm not like that. I'm like, I just love snow. I could just, you know, look at it, touch it.
I saw some pretty sweet videos of some friends in Tahoe who, when the roads were closed, I guess just like after this whole pandemic thing hit, were just like riding snowmobiles around on the roads because nothing was really plowed very much. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to split board from my house. So I actually was able to get 6 days from the house, 2 of which I actually skinned out of my garage. So yeah,
wow.
The benefit of staying at home where you really want to be staying.
Yeah, a little bit of a house flex right there.
Yep. Cool. I'm going to just double check and see. I'm just going to double check and see where we're at. So as you guys fill that out, once you get to the 3rd one, let me know when you're done. You guys are all doing a really good job.
Thanks for the encouragement. This is really hard for me, writing things.
Not a test. It's not a test.
It's so hard.
Marshall, if you can do all three. See, I think this is part of my test of saying how much is too much. I probably should have broken it down into 3 separate surveys and we could have pieced it together, but.
Is this just a ploy of using up all your time without talking about anything, Doug? Because you're doing a great job, buddy.
Is it working?
Yeah.
Nice work, Conrad. If it was a race, only AASI beat you. So as you guys are finishing up, if you're working away, feel free to just block me out and keep going. I wanted to, share a little bit of my story of connecting to progression building and why I look at progression building now in the way I do versus maybe how I used to, and that connection to that instructor mind, right? We train so hard, and when we're in that, I'd like to think when our instructors are at that level 2 range, what does that do for us when we're really trying to figure all the baseline of things out? How are we, approaching the balance of a flood of new knowledge versus trying to do the best by our students. And generally that's like the upside down iceberg, right? Where we have all this content and we end up sharing way too much with our students. And in a progression, we end up trying to put a lot of steps, which a lot of steps in a limited amount of time equate to less practice, where a lot of times the importance is working through the stages of development with each session of practice, right? So if I have a 2 or 3 step progression, I want to make sure that each thing I'm introducing, I'm going through and starting that range of movement, going through all those necessary steps for that person to actually go through initial elementary mature development of connecting the brain, connecting what we call muscle memory, right? The neural pathways to the actual movement and getting repetition. Generally, that's around 100 repetitions before that becomes ingrained. So a lot of it is looking at what even for myself, I used to be, I'm going to give them all these cool different things. And I ended up cutting it down the opportunity for practice because I wanted to give them more. Where now, if we look at it, the iceberg, the point of all the content is to be simple yet accurate, increase practice, and allow time for people to actually get through and go through the stage of development with individual tasks. So if you kind of think of things that way, it really helps. This exercise is for an instructor for us to go through this mental process of what are the different things that we use and how do we start setting priorities, right? Because if we can always say everything is awesome, everything is important, but how do we set priorities within all of the good stuff that I want to present? So let's see where we're at. Oh, boom. You guys did awesome. So we are going to, real quick before we take a look at these, anybody want to share any thoughts or feedback going through that before we actually go and review it?
Sure, this is KB. One of the things I thought about a lot about is I like how the progression went from like simple carving to dynamic carving, ultimately ended up in the pipe, which is just a version of carving. So I did like that progression. One of the things I thought about, I think that as I look at the progression, they all equate to something happening in the pipe at the end, because the first one I believe was limiting the skid at the start, which is, getting that carve at initiation. And what I talked about in the pipe was if someone wants to get more amplitude, instead of having them take more speed, which would probably be an answer that, a lot of people would use, I actually had them build the speed by understanding how to set that edge early in the wall to set their line, so they can use their center of mass to get a pump on the down tranny, where they can actually build the speed and feel what that speed feels like, versus just have them go into the pipe hotter. So I had them start in the middle of the pipe, set that edge early, start low, and then watch yourself build out as you set that edge and line early, and then using your center of mass to pump the down tranny.
Cool. I like that. And I like how you kind of grasped the connection between the three. One thing that's interesting is that when we go and review this, when you guys started with the first 2 exercises, you didn't know per se that it was going into pipe. So we can start to look at saying, okay, well, when, we build these progressions, what's a goal that I might have that's beyond the student's goal, right? I think that for me has been something that really helps me. I start to create a vision for that rider, start setting goals for that rider beyond their own goals. And that has helped me as a coach be able to elevate people and share that, like, help them find their new goals, right? Let them, give them access to something they don't yet see. Cool. Anybody else want to share any thoughts before we jump in?
Yeah.
Quick, Doug, that's kind of what I thought when you meant instructor goals, was the instructor setting the goal for the student, because I noticed that happens a lot. So
yeah, that can happen in kind of two. One can be, is it relevant to the actual rider, right? And sometimes that we set a goal that's not relevant. And a lot of times this is, for example, like happens almost all beginner lessons, right? My goals and which I'm so determined to achieve to meet my expectations of them that I miss what their goal was for the day. Their goal was to have a hot cocoa, like, and that my goal was they have to ride the chairlift. They're going to ride it 3 times. And it wasn't relevant to the student. So I think that it can become performance board related. It can become something that's not tied to their goal. But if we can work with that student and really share with them a vision for where they can go and have them adopt that to be their new goal, then that's the success, right? Cool. Anybody else? Someone else was going to jump in.
Yeah. Some of these questions were really difficult to answer just because it is 100% dependent on the student sometimes. So like the thing that we want them to focus on, like visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, whatever, that is 100% going to be dependent on what learning preferences the student has. So this was definitely something where like I thought of what I personally might, feel the need to kind of, focus on. But sometimes it's really difficult to just say, hey, this is the most important thing that we need to focus on is feeling the sensation versus like thinking about the sensation.
Awesome. And Cody, if you really when we run a scenario in our head, we create, maybe it's a student that we worked in the past, or we create a fictitious student, right? This is helping us, not only can we use like imagery brain training for our own technique, but we can also do it in how we deliver and present. So don't be afraid in these types of situations to just make stuff up, right? And then when we apply these in real life, it is so key, obviously, to plug in what is that person's really need, what do they really need? What is their preferred method of receiving information? Where are they at that given moment? So that's a great one. Awesome. Anybody else? All right, so let me jump into our screen share again. So everybody got our progression building exercise part 1? Yeah? Cool. So again, feel free to pull yourself off mute at any time and just chime in. But as we review these, think about, this is for us now, not just the practice of filling out this form, but being able to review and see other people's point of view. So sharing your point of view is really helpful for other people. So what is in this situation? That's that top of the turn, where there's always a little bit of a skid when we're first introducing how to carve. Timing, intensity, duration, rate seem to be the hot 70% of people check that one. Static to dynamic being the follow-up with that. Which, interesting, task to free ride, no one checked. So that's kind of a cool little focus. Movement focus. This is where I feel, okay, well, if someone's skidding at the top of the turn, what do I want their focus to be? Am I focusing on something that they're putting in too much of, or am I focusing on something that I want them to do more of, right? So I think here's kind of a cool little balance. So lateral range, as in most likely, I think that one's focused tip to tail, flexing the ankles. So some people focus towards specific movement. Less rotation, less is more, right? So taking away the body's rotation input that's causing the pivot, which is most likely causing the skid, or causing, a twist, which is causing the skid. Forward at initiation, lateral range of motion through angulation. Cool. Let's work on moving the center of mass from one edge to the other. Seeing that connection to the sequence movements, I think is a big step of like, okay, when am I doing what? Before I can go full like Euro style carve, I need to create some foundation exercises. Cool. Anything popping out different from what you guys were thinking in those sections? And as we roll down to performance, fundamental focus, you can kind of start to see how certain people are going to be focusing on, again, what I want to add. Some people are going to be focusing on what I want to remove, right? Tilt and lack of pivot. Cool. Tilt, the twist. And I think with the twist, it's realizing a lot of times in this phase, we get into that. Are we moving our feet sequentially, or are we moving our feet simultaneously, right? If we're talking that connection to edging. And then let's see, rider focus. What is most crucial? Sensation. I think this is a really cool one, thinking of at which stage are we connecting to sensation versus overall visual focus. So we got a lot of people focused on that kinesthetics. Progression tasks, taking a look at the progression tasks. And then our terrain progression. I think this one has a pretty, simple terrain progression. So for this exercise, do you guys feel that there was anything that varied differently from what you were thinking? Maybe in the tasks, maybe in the performance.
Can you just go back to the top really quick?
Yeah.
With that first answer.
This one here?
Yeah, I just wanted to hear from somebody who put one of the first two lines, what they thought, static to dynamic or simple to complex.
Yeah.
If anybody put that, if you don't want to say, that's fine. No, okay, that's fine.
Well, and I think that what's interesting here is like when you look at sequence versus blending, maybe that people are going to relate that more at an advanced level. The task to free ride, I think that, we've got a small group here, but we're starting to able to see into like, okay, this is a commonality and this is maybe a unique element. So cool. Let's roll down into the next one. So retraction style carving. So we're still keeping that carving theme. Now we're adding that element of retraction where really focused on, right? Because we're saying retraction, we're really intentionally adding, the magnitude of pressure fundamental into this. When we look at our progression building tools, what's more important? We now have a more of a spread, right? Now we don't have one heavily weighted. We have, and part of it is people are starting to get familiar with filling out the form too. So they get a little bit more, maybe they're checking more often. No. So a pretty broad scope as far as what tools people want to use. The movement focus, flexion extension, vertical range, flexion extension, intensity, so by saying retraction, I think we automatically get in the habit of, okay, we hear that and then that's what I'm going to teach. But I think what we can start to do is realize, cool, what else allows us to be able to if it's, yeah, flexion extensions maybe a component, but maybe it's being able to understand the ability to move tip to tail on the board, being able to generate board flex so that the flexion extension is more a component of the board's energy, right? So I think that's where we can, by being able to see what other people, by brainstorming, we can start to say, okay, well, maybe there's not a set answer, or maybe the answer that everybody goes to, is that the right answer, right? Because sometimes when it's super obvious, well, does that super obvious answer always equate to success on the snow? Then we're jumping into performance, fundamental focus, some really pressure, magnitude, tilt, but timing, intensity, duration changes, rebound, right? That rebound of that board snapping back. Cool. For me with rebound, it's not the rebound itself. Part of it's managing the energy coming in, but a lot of it's how do we generate the energy, right? How are we creating that energy? Rider focus, still sensation is winning. And then let's see our tasks and progressions. Static squat drops, yes. Awesome. Going from a skidded to a carve. Center mass, I like that. Getting the retraction through some pivot slips. This one starts to really open up to a lot of broad exercises. And then let's see the terrain, if the terrain has any big variation, blue, green. Ooh, I like, this is the one I was wondering how many people would throw in there, the moguls. We had someone throw out the moguls, where we're able to use the terrain actually for the ability to create the retraction, right? We're actually able to use that terrain unweighting style of not only just bringing the board to us, but allowing the terrain to push the board towards our center of mass. That's awesome. Cool. Any thoughts on this one? Keep it going. You guys feeling good? Yeah. Cool. And then we'll summarize all this. And so now we went from a car, essentially developing a true carve turn, to now building retraction, to now those two actually led into, cool, now you actually have some fundamentals which are going to allow you to ride half pipe. This rider, they can make it to the lip, but how do they get out of the half pipe? Looking now at our progression building tools, man, sequence movements versus blended movements suddenly really, jumped out. Timing, intensity, duration, rate. I think we can see that we're rarely using any of these in isolation. We're usually going to use timing, intensity, duration, rate in conjunction with many other tools. But I liked how the sequenced movements versus blended movements popped up. The movement focus. And this is where, because half pipe, I feel a lot of people, have different viewpoints on half pipe, but I think then we start to really go to a broader scope of, okay, what's our key for amplitude gaining? What's our movement? Pumping, body position in the transition. So overall stance and alignment, pressure focus, lower edge angle, creating pumping, pressures in the back leg. Cool. One of the things when I work with people and they say pumping, generally I'm going to actually try to pull out a little bit more context from them. Are they moving down? Are they moving up? Are they moving forward? Are they moving back? Right? And if you're pumping down the transition, generally you're dropping your center of mass while driving forward, right? So you're generally adding those two elements together. So when you say pumping, if, you know, from like me as an examiner, I'd like, well, it doesn't mean anything unless you add the context. But if you are a skateboarder and you've already like, or you've, you know, you've ridden pump tracks on a mountain bike, you probably already have that programmed in. So it automatically comes with context based on your experience, right? Performance, fundamentals, and focus. Line choice is, when we think of line choice, generally I'm going to think about line choice tied to the edge. Tilt, I like, you know, less or more tilt. How do you have less tilt but still keep a carve without jumping into a skid? Carving through the phases of the pipe. I like connecting it to the when in the pipe relative to the feature. Carving, flat riding, flatten the snowboard, going up the wall. Cool. So we're focusing on what we're doing to maintain or take our energy from across the pipe to up the pipe. Cool. And I will loop back on this one. So rider's focus. Now we just jumped up. Eyes finally got on the map. So the importance of sensation relative to the other exercises has gone down a little bit. The mind focus has gone up a little bit, and the eyes really got focused. So a lot of people thinking about where am I looking and how that is relevant to success in the half pipe or success on a quarter pipe wall. Tasks, let's see. And this is where I tend to like, as an instructor, I like, this is where I do most of my stealing, right? Okay, what tasks do I like that other people did that I didn't think of? And I want to take those, right? So carving to flat, timing down the move, front knee. 1,000 turns. Yes. Creating energy down the transition. Cool. Smaller lines, progressively getting bigger. Cool. And then obviously our terrain, probably a wide range of different terrain usage here. Wall rides, timing, blues, steep runs, natural. Awesome. Cool. And then the framing of all this is measurement of success. When we look at what we've done, when we reflect on our students' day, when we reflect on our day that we delivered, how do we measure success? So for you guys, how do you look and frame success of your students? And generally, if you go back to the original framework of keeping that rider's goal in frame. Looking back at this one here, a little bit about amplitude and carving. Pumping is obviously that ability to drop the center of mass and be able to move and generate energy based on center of mass relative to its distance from the snow. The ability as we come across the flats to transition all the energy from across to vertical, right? Obviously, it's that a bit of that, you know, isometric, you know, where we're resisting the pressure, not as much of a, you know, active range of motion. Most likely, if you're a strong athletic pipe rider, you're more in that kind of isokinetic range where you're never really stuck in one position. You're always kind of moving and you're controlling specific rates. I think that from working with athletes and other coaches, the common denominator ends up coming to edging and being able to set an edge as high as possible on the wall, right? So I think for me, that's where I actually look at saying, okay, my goal here with every rider, if I can set a solid edge, if I can keep that edge, even if they did nothing else, if they are able to go from carve to carve, you'll be able to generate and carry the most energy. That's the one that plays the hand to physics as well. Then you add the vertical ranges of movement in order to, and fore and aft ranges of movement to help build those things. So cool. I hope you guys enjoyed. Any, you guys want to jump on and share a little thoughts on this little exercise? Could be specific to the rider's goals, or it could be, if you want to just talk about kind of going through this little process.
I'll just say thanks for putting this together. This seems pretty sweet. It was a cool thing to go through without knowing that half pipe was the end goal, and it totally made sense in retrospect. But when you're building it up, and then you go back and think about your choices from earlier, and we're like, oh, does that make sense? If now I know that that's the end goal, maybe it doesn't. So you have to go and kind of like rethink what you said earlier. So that was a cool part of it.
Cool. Thanks, Conrad. Anybody else? What do you guys think?
It was good to see people's perspective on it, ideas, and how they would approach it. And just in comparison to what you would do, like, you know, as individually you'd do. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah, and I think that's where, like, when we train, rarely can we side-by-side comparison what someone else would say, you know. And I think by being able to see it in this framework, this is like being able to review this is really the best opportunity, I think, for learning. So you guys should be able to have access to that link. You should be able to pull up the responses on that. I will keep this live if you want to go back and check it as well. So. Cool. So the big takeaway in regards to progression building and in regards to this exercise is, first off, there's not a specific right way. And especially if we start looking at, I want to have a bunch of ways to achieve the similar thing so that I have the ability to adapt my teaching based around the specific needs of the student. As you start looking at how do I get, if you're saying nothing's wrong, nothing's right, well, how do I get better? Base it around science, base it around how, you know, if you're thinking about half pipe, base it around the science of how things work. Those will be the grounders, right? Those will be the things to say, okay, well, this is a true, you know, this is how I can take, you know, linear momentum, angular momentum back to linear momentum, right? Okay, there's the concept. If you're not a very science-based person, that's okay. It's saying, okay, well, how can I get this person to explore different movements so that they can try to find what works best for them? And going through, cool, I've got a couple different processes. What works for that individual student? And that's where by doing that and thinking in that light, you're able to get back into what is the key importance, which is rider's goal, right? What is their real goal of the day? Maybe it's a season goal, maybe it's, you know, a longer term goal than that. How do you adapt that long-term goal to a specific goal for the day so that you can actually then reflect and measure their success? And then in turn, as an instructor, your success. From a trainer's point of view, as trainers, if you are working with other instructors and training them how to build the baseline for these tools, get people to understand these kind of frameworks, the static to dynamic, simple to complex. What does it mean having a sequence? Is it a sequenced movement, or is it becoming a blended movement? How do you work tasks into free ride, and how do you manipulate movements by using timing, intensity, duration, and rate? So use those things to be the foundation of tools for your instructors that you're training, and just make sure that they're staying rider focused. Cool. Well, thank you guys. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and feel free to take any of this stuff, steal it, share it, This was an experiment. This was the first one of these I've done as far as creating the survey tool. I think it does have, I think if you had, imagine if you had like 100 responses, you know, I think you'd start to get more. And I think especially people going through it a few times, you'd start to be able to build a little bit more in the process. Maybe not being on the spot with me looking at you fill out the form.
Sweet. Well, thanks very much, Doug. My question to you is, what did you learn going through this?
What did I learn going through this? I learned that generally instructors are predictable. So I wrote the questions in a way, or I set up the scenarios in a way that would kind of had built-in cues into them. So to see if people will grasp on those cues or go down different roads. I think with this group specifically, we have a strong group with a lot of experience. I think it would be much different if you were to share this with maybe people who have just been, just went through new hire training. Or, obviously it would probably be above their head when you got into some of it. But you could alter the scenarios, right?
Okay.
And I think that's where it'd be cool.
Is there any spot that it didn't go down this road that you thought it would go down?
I was surprised that the visual didn't come in until later.
Okay.
Yeah, because I sometimes, so this one here with the first, let's see, actually right here. With the first one, I was surprised that no one put the visual in the skidded carve.
Do you think that comes from our preferences though, whether we're visual, auditory, or kinesthetic?
Not necessarily, because then it changed as you went through the 3 scenarios. So I wouldn't, if this stayed the same the whole time, like the rider focus, then I would say, but it rapidly changed once you got down to the half pipe. So I think it's in part tied to like our personal preferences, but it might also be tied to the medium that we're engaging with at the moment. So
just Doug, something on that for me is like visual was something I would have focused on quite a bit with my people earlier, just for them to get some turn shape. So for me, I was thinking of it as what is the new thing that I'm playing with, as opposed, that's the new focus is this new sensation, as opposed to something that I probably would have already been playing with.
Cool. Yeah. And I think that's where like it is about setting priorities, once you have a scope of knowledge base, then we can start to say, okay, well, I'm not just trying to figure it out. I'm with intention selecting what I feel is the most important. And that's what makes great coaches, great trainers, great instructors, is being able to set the priority of what's important. So.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Doug. And thank you very much, AD, as well, for presenting. Thanks for making another great Monday night. So, yeah, awesome. Little round of applause for you guys. Woo! Sweet. So next week, we've got 2 more presenters, and we're doing it for another week at least. So we'll see how it goes. We've got Dana right here over my shoulder, and Noah Hopkins from Breckenridge, so 2 Rocky Mountain people. Thank you to the people from outside our division for joining us here on a Rocky Mountain web thing, and yeah, thanks for making it what it is. So awesome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem at all. Lynn, do you have anything to add before we all get out of here and have dinner?
Cool. Thanks, AD. Thanks, Doug. You guys crushed it. And we'll talk about what's going to happen in the future. We might need to switch to every other week. We'll figure it out. But thank you so much, guys, for coming.
Cool.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the opportunity.
Cool. And with that, everybody have a great night, great rest of your week. Go out and enjoy yourselves. And if you're around, see you next Monday.